My beloved child, stop scrolling and remain here for a moment, because something written in secrecy is waiting for your heart. You were not brought to these words by accident. What you are about to hear was meant to find you before doubt convinced you to walk away, before silence hardened into distance, and before a hidden message vanished without ever reaching the one person it was written for. Your soulmate has just written you a secret love letter, but this is not an ordinary letter. It was written with trembling hands, unfinished breaths, and emotions they could no longer contain. And in 5 minutes, it disappears. Do not rush away. Stay until the end, because the most important words in that letter were not written at the beginning. They were placed near the final lines, after your soulmate erased them twice, rewrote them, and stared at your name as though it carried the weight of an entire future. Something huge is waiting for you inside this message. Something they have hidden beneath pride, hesitation, and a fear they have never admitted aloud. Heaven has watched them try to silence this feeling, but tonight, silence finally became more painful than truth. There is a reason your heart has felt unsettled lately. There is a reason certain memories have returned without warning, why familiar songs have sounded different, and why your thoughts have wandered toward one particular person even when you were trying to focus on everything else. You may have called it coincidence. You may have told yourself it was only nostalgia. But what you felt was the movement of an unspoken confession trying to find its way toward you. Your soulmate has been carrying words they believed they would never have the courage to say. They kept them locked inside because speaking them would change everything. Once the truth crossed the distance between you, they knew they could no longer pretend this connection was ordinary. They could no longer hide behind timing, uncertainty, or the opinions of others. The letter became their only safe place. On that page, they allowed themselves to be honest in a way they have not been honest with anyone else. They began with your name. Then they stopped. They stared at it for a long time because seeing your name awakened everything they had tried to bury. It reminded them of the first moment something inside them recognized you. Not simply noticed you. Recognized you. There was a strange familiarity in your presence, as though their spirit had been waiting longer than their mind could understand. Something about you felt like a memory from a future they had not yet lived. Do not skip now, because the next part explains why the letter is disappearing. Your soulmate did not write it intending to keep it forever. They wrote it during a moment of emotional surrender, when their defenses were weak and their heart was louder than their fear. But afterward, panic began to rise. They realized that if you ever read those words, you would see through every mask they had worn. You would know how often they thought of you. You would understand why they became distant when the feelings became too intense. You would finally see that the silence was never emptiness. It was emotion without courage. That frightened them. So they made a decision. They gave the letter a short life. 5 minutes. Enough time for truth to exist, but not enough time for fear to become unbearable. They believed that if destiny wanted you to hear it, somehow the message would reach you before it disappeared. They did not know that heaven had already seen every word. Listen closely. The first line after your name was simple, but it held more truth than anything they had said to you before. They wrote, "I have tried to forget what I feel, but every time I do, something brings me back to you." Then they erased it. They thought it sounded too vulnerable. They thought you might misunderstand. They worried you might believe they were weak, confused, or speaking from loneliness. But the truth was deeper. They were not returning to you because they had nowhere else to go. They were returning in their thoughts because no other connection had reached the place within them that you touched without trying. They rewrote the line. This time they wrote, "No matter how far I go emotionally, some part of me still waits where I last felt understood by you." My child, that sentence cost them more than you realize. Your soulmate is not someone who finds it easy to admit they need understanding. They have spent much of their life appearing strong, composed, and unaffected. They learn to hide disappointment behind silence. They learn to pretend they did not care when they cared too deeply. They learn to leave first, withdraw first, or become distant before anyone could see how deeply they could be hurt. But with you, those strategies stopped working. You saw something behind their words. Even when they gave you little, your presence seemed to notice more. Even when they tried to act unaffected, something in your energy made them feel exposed. That is why they sometimes moved closer and then suddenly pulled away. It was not because the connection meant nothing. It was because it meant enough to frighten every unhealed part of them. Pause here, because a revelation is coming that they have never shared with you. There was a specific moment when your soulmate realized their feelings had become impossible to dismiss. It was not during a dramatic conversation. It was not when you looked your best or said something unforgettable. It happened during an ordinary moment when they saw a side of you that others often overlook. Perhaps you were tired but still kind. Perhaps you were carrying your own pain but made space for someone else. Perhaps you laughed when you could have complained. Perhaps you remained gentle after being misunderstood. Whatever the moment was, it changed the way they saw you. They realized your beauty was not only in your appearance. It was in the way your heart continued to give warmth even after life had given you reasons to become cold. That moment entered the letter. They wrote, "You do not know this, but I saw you when you thought no one was paying attention. That was the moment I knew my feelings were real." They left that sentence untouched. They did not erase it because it was the clearest truth they possessed. Your soulmate has noticed more about you than they have ever admitted. They remember details you assumed were forgotten. The way your voice changes when you are hiding sadness. The way you pause before speaking when something matters deeply. The small expressions you make when you are trying not to smile. The moments when you become quiet because explaining your heart feels exhausting. They have studied your silence because their heart kept asking questions their mouth was afraid to speak. Why do I feel calm when I think of this person? Why does their absence feel louder than the presence of others? Why do I compare every new connection to something I never fully allowed myself to experience? Why does the thought of losing them feel like losing a future I was meant to live? These questions followed them into nights when the world around them had gone quiet. And tonight, they answered them in the secret letter. Stay with me, because the next line reveals why the message had to be written now. Your soulmate recently discovered something that unsettled them deeply. They began to sense that you were changing. Not becoming cold, but becoming stronger. They felt you withdrawing your energy from uncertainty. They sensed that you were learning to stop waiting for people who could not decide how to value you. They noticed a shift in the spiritual bond between you, as though your soul had reached a doorway and was preparing to walk through it with or without them. This frightened them more than they expected. Until now, they believed there would always be more time. More time to understand their feelings. More time to heal. More time to return. More time to explain. They thought the connection would wait patiently while they battled their fears. But something happened recently that made them realize time does not promise itself to anyone. They felt your absence before you had fully left. That was the moment the letter began. Your soulmate wrote, "I think I have been acting as though your heart would remain in the same place forever, and I am beginning to understand how unfair that was." They stared at those words for several minutes. Shame rose in them, not because they intended to hurt you, but because they finally saw the emotional burden they had placed on you. They realized their hesitation may have made you question your worth. Their silence may have caused you to wonder whether the connection existed only in your imagination. Their mixed signals may have left you standing between hope and self-protection. They never wanted you to feel foolish for caring. They never wanted you to believe your love was invisible. But intention does not erase impact, and tonight, they finally understood that. Do not leave now. Something extraordinary was written next. Your soulmate began to confess what they had been doing during the distance. You may have imagined they moved on easily. You may have pictured them laughing, living, and forgetting. You may have believed your absence did not affect them because they never showed you otherwise. But the letter reveals a hidden reality. They looked for you in places you had never been. They searched for your energy in conversations with others. They listened for your understanding in voices that could not reach them. They compared unfamiliar smiles to the one expression of yours that always softened their defenses. They entered rooms full of people and still felt the absence of one soul. They tried to convince themselves they only missed familiarity. Then they realized they missed you in moments that had nothing to do with habit. They missed the person you were becoming. They missed conversations you had never even had. They missed the future more than the past. That is when they wrote, "I do not only miss what we had. I miss what I believe we were supposed to become." My child, this is where their tears began. They had been holding themselves together until that sentence appeared on the page. But seeing the truth in written form broke through the wall they had built. Their eyes filled because the future they imagined with you felt close enough to touch and far enough to lose. They saw fragments of it all at once: ordinary mornings, honest conversations, shared laughter, healing after disagreements, quiet support, and a kind of love that did not need to perform in order to be real. They imagined you beside them in moments they have never told anyone about. They imagined telling you the things they hide when they say, "I am fine." They imagined allowing you to know them without editing the difficult parts. They imagined being chosen by you after finally becoming brave enough to choose you clearly. And then another fear appeared. What if they were already too late? That question changed the energy of the letter. Their words became faster, more urgent, less controlled. They stopped trying to sound composed. They stopped correcting every sentence. Truth began pouring out in the form it had always wanted to take. They wrote, "I do not know whether you still feel what I feel. I do not know whether my silence taught your heart to live without me. But I need you to know that I was never unaffected." That line was meant for the part of you that blamed yourself. You wondered whether you imagined the connection. You questioned whether your intuition had misled you. You replayed conversations, searching for evidence that what you felt had been shared. You may even have criticized your own heart for holding on too long. But the letter says you were not imagining everything. There was something real. There is something real. Yet heaven wants you to understand that reality alone is not enough. A connection must be met with truth, maturity, and action. Feelings hidden forever cannot build a future. Love that remains trapped behind fear eventually becomes another form of distance. That is why this message is not only about what your soulmate feels. It is about what they are preparing to do with those feelings. Something shifted in them while they were writing. The letter began as a confession, but it slowly became a decision. Stay until the final word, because you have not yet heard the sentence that changed everything. Before writing that sentence, your soulmate closed their eyes. They took a long breath. They thought about every excuse they had used: bad timing, uncertainty, fear of rejection, past wounds, complicated circumstances, and the belief that waiting would somehow make courage easier. Then they realized courage does not arrive before action. It is created through action. They understood that they could lose you while waiting to become fearless. They understood that the safest choice could become the one they regretted most. They understood that protecting themselves from possible pain might also protect them from the love they had prayed to experience. So they wrote, "I am tired of allowing fear to make decisions that my heart should be making." Those words were not erased. Something inside them became still after writing that line. For the first time, their fear did not disappear, but it stopped controlling the room. They looked at your name again and felt something stronger than panic. They felt clarity. Your soulmate knows now that the connection cannot remain trapped in signs, glances, memories, and imagined conversations. They know that eventually, someone must speak. Someone must take the risk of being known. Someone must step out of the safety of silence and enter the uncertainty of truth. They are beginning to understand that it may need to be them. But before they could write what they intended to do, another memory surfaced. This memory was painful. It involved a moment when you needed reassurance and they failed to give it. Perhaps you reached toward them emotionally and they responded with distance. Perhaps you offered honesty and received confusion. Perhaps you waited for words that never came. They remembered your expression. They remembered how you tried to hide your disappointment. They remembered how the energy between you changed afterward. And for the first time, they allowed themselves to see that moment from your perspective. They wrote, "There was a time when you gave me an opening, and I was too afraid to walk through it. I have regretted that more than you know." My child, they have replayed that moment many times. In their mind, they say what they should have said. They answer differently. They stay instead of withdrawing. They tell you not to doubt what you mean to them. But memory does not allow revision. It only offers lessons. That lesson became another promise in the letter. They wrote, "If life gives me another honest moment with you, I do not want to waste it." Notice the wording. They did not say, "I will never be afraid." They said they no longer want fear to waste the moment. That is a deeper kind of courage. It is not the absence of trembling. It is the decision to speak while the voice still trembles. Yet the letter is disappearing because they are not fully certain they can bear the vulnerability of being seen this clearly. Part of them wants you to read every word. Another part wants to erase the evidence that they ever felt this deeply. That inner battle is unfolding right now. One part says, "Send it." Another says, "Protect yourself." One part says, "Tell the truth." Another says, "What if the truth is not returned?" One part sees a future with you. Another remembers every past disappointment and warns them not to hope. But there is a third voice rising inside them now. It is quieter than fear, yet stronger. It says, "What if this love did not enter your life to be avoided?" That question stopped them. The room felt different. The silence no longer felt empty. They felt as though something unseen was standing near them, inviting them to choose differently than they had chosen before. They did not know how to explain it, but they felt watched over, guided, encouraged. They returned to the letter and wrote, "Some connections feel like choices. You have always felt like recognition." This was the line they almost deleted. It felt too spiritual, too revealing, too close to the truth they had never spoken. But they could not remove it. Every time they tried, something in them resisted. Because your soulmate has felt the same strange pull you have felt. They have experienced moments when your energy seemed close even when you were far away. They have thought of you seconds before seeing something connected to you. They have dreamed of conversations that left them emotional after waking. They may not understand these experiences, but they have not forgotten them. The letter explains one dream in particular. In the dream, they were standing in a place filled with soft golden light. They could not see the source, but everything felt calm. You were there, a short distance away. They tried to call your name, but no sound came out. Then you began walking toward a doorway. They wanted to follow. They wanted to ask you to wait. But their feet would not move. Just before you passed through the doorway, you turned and looked at them. There was no anger in your face. Only love mixed with sadness. Then you disappeared beyond the light. They woke with tears on their face. For days, they tried to dismiss the dream. But something about it remained. It felt less like imagination and more like a warning from their own heart. Speak before the opportunity changes. Tonight, they included that dream in the letter. They wrote, "I think part of me knows that if I keep standing still, I may watch you enter a life where I can no longer reach you." This is why the 5 minutes matter. It is not only the life of the letter. It represents the shrinking distance between hesitation and consequence. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that some opportunities do not disappear dramatically. They fade quietly while people assume they will always remain. You have been changing in ways they can feel. You are learning that peace is not found by chasing answers from those who remain uncertain. You are learning to honor the love you give by offering it only where it can be held with care. You are beginning to choose yourself without closing your heart. And that growth has made your soulmate realize they cannot approach you with the same confusion they carried before. They know that if they return, they must return differently. Not with half-truths. Not with vague attention. Not with a temporary burst of emotion followed by another retreat. They must bring clarity. The letter says, you deserve more than someone who only becomes honest when they feel they are losing you. They paused after writing that. Because they knew it was true. They knew a confession motivated only by panic would not be enough. They needed to ask themselves whether they were ready to love you consistently, not merely intensely. Whether they were prepared to communicate after the emotional moment passed. Whether they could remain present when vulnerability became uncomfortable. The answer did not come immediately. But as they continued writing, something in them began to align. They remembered how empty it felt to avoid you. They remembered how exhausting it was to pretend indifference. They remembered every moment when honesty could have brought peace, yet fear created confusion instead. And then they wrote.